The Marlins are the worst team in baseball. What changes can they make? Can they make any changes? Do they want to make any changes? Or is it just going to sit, wait, get to the deadline, and make some moves? Tons to get into. This is Locked on Marlins.
You are Locked on Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked on Marlins. This is your daily Marlins pod. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. If you're listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for joining us on Tuesday's episode. It is the end of the month, and the Marlins have not had the best month, it's fair to say. This is your team every day, of course, and there is a YouTube channel. Make sure you hit subscribe over on the YouTube channel. It is also called Locked on Marlins. Join us there in the comments in particular. So subscribe, enjoy the comments, join us and have fun. If you are watching, you will see the UK GOAT is back. Shaun Barrett is back. It's been a while. It's been that long. He hasn't seen that intro music before, so he's probably sitting there going, man, Locked on Marlins has been pumped up. UK GOAT, Shaun Barrett, how we doing, brother?
Yeah, not bad. But yeah, you've had an upgrade since I was last here. More upgrades than the Marlins, that's for sure.
No doubt.
But yeah, no, good to be back with you, even though there might not be much in the way of positivity to talk about. But hey, that's my wheelhouse, right?
This is when Shaun Barrett comes alive. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got for us in store, mate. Speaking of positivity, though, let's start with probably the most positive segment of this episode, and it is that it's sponsored by Monopoly Go. I admit it. I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. There you go, see? Started positive. Monopoly Go. So, unfortunately, the Marlins are currently the worst team in baseball. The White Sox somehow went on a streak, and they just spanked the Rays, which I think is really interesting, considering the Marlins are trying to emulate the Rays. So I think it's an interesting situation that maybe the Rays are going backwards too at this point. Nevertheless, Skip Schumacher called it out on a post-game presser as well. There's changes happening. We're trying to make changes. You maybe can't quite see what they are, and we're not going to tell you what they are, but things are changing. Nevertheless, though, the results don't seem to be changing. Shaun, over the weekend, the Marlins found new creative ways to lose. And as we record this right now, they're currently 6-23. 6 wins in the whole of the season thus far. I think the Phillies have won 6 in a row. Maybe even, I don't know. Nevertheless, Shaun, how the hell could you sum this start up for the Marlins?
It's the worst I can never remember, that's for sure.
Has to be.
I mean, this 6-loss run that they're on at the moment is not even the biggest run they've had this season, because they started out 0-9. So,
I forgot about that.
Yeah, the next question is, how far does this go? I mean, Bendix said today that this isn't going to last forever, and at a certain point, you've got to ask the question, well, it might. The Marlins really have given up on this season, haven't they? I think the off-season kind of prompted us towards this, but obviously the injuries haven't helped. But yeah, this season now is incredibly hard to watch. So hard to watch that, I'll be frank, I haven't watched much of it. And I think we got into May last year before I'd stopped watching every single pitch live. That included a couple of games where I saw the sunrise before final pitch.
Yeah.
So the fact that I'm already out is concerning.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the general vibe. And the thing is with baseball, it's such a commitment, a time commitment, because of the frequency of games. And luckily, in the past few years, they've actually done a lot to shorten the games, which is a godsend, to be honest with you. But the commitment as a fan to following a baseball team daily is a huge one. And that involves maybe 3 hours worth of watching, plus probably some wraparound time thinking about them on Twitter, engaging and talking about the Marlins. And so it's a full-time job, effectively, to follow the Marlins. And really, considering the majority of us aren't paid for anything linked to the Marlins, you can understand. I can understand why people are checking out. from your perspective now, Shaun, like what's your viewing schedule look like now from a Marlins? Like a Marlins game is on, clearly like non-UK friendly. So a midnight start, is that just a no-go for you at this point?
Depending on work, yeah, I'm certainly not going to lose any sleep to watch the Marlins at this point. And again, it's about picking your points, isn't it? I mean, it's a case of in a season where you know you're going to lose 90 to 100 games. And that's the first time I've probably publicly said 100. I think I've avoided 100. I even made the Marlins play 161 games this year with a rain out to avoid a 100-loss season. But I think that's pretty much where you're going. At this point now, it's looking at things that will help for the future. So I know a lot of people have moved on to the minor league system, and now I'm watching more and more minor league games, which makes sense because you can project and you can hope and you can dream of a better future. But at the major league level, you're looking at people who are going to help going forwards. And unfortunately, with the injuries and the obvious trade candidates, when the team is eventually blown up, and I'm resigned to that now fully. You've got to pick your poisons. Obviously, you want to see some growth from Eddie. You want to see the continued progression with Ryan Weathers. You want to see if Trevor can do anything. That's the pitching part of it. The hitting, I mean, who is it? It's Sanchez. It's I don't know. Who else? Jake Berger, probably. That's pretty much it. Everyone else is either going to be gone. What they do with Jazz is going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, is he a trade candidate at this point? Of course, everyone is. So, it depends on return. We spoke last time or a few times when I was last on, but the idea of what do the Marlins have as far as trade bait to force a rebuild, and it might have to be Jazz as well because his financial commitments going forward, obviously now into arbitration. By the time the Marlins are ready to compete again, Jazz is going to be in his free agency years. Yeah. And is Jazz good enough for the Marlins to build around him for a rebuild, or do they just keep him as the face of the franchise through the rebuild, knowing that he's not going to be there when he competes? Because the Marlins don't draw many people. We know that. And the joke's there. The fact that they drew 12,500 on average over last weekend is a huge surprise. But ultimately, they've got to be able to market somebody. Yeah. And as we've seen already with his national exposure, Jazz can be used as a promotion tool for the Marlins. So maybe they do keep him just to try and keep some bums on the seats.
I'd be surprised at this point, to be honest with you. I'm looking around. To your point, you're looking around and thinking, if you're going to fully reboot this thing and give yourself the best possible chance for when that window may or may not open, of which who knows how long that could be. But you have to consider that within the next 3 seasons, that window won't be there, is the most likely situation. And so I don't think Jazz and the Marlins financially will ever be a good fit. I don't think their value will ever align. And considering, I look at the team right now, I look at the offense this year thus far, and for me, Jazz has been, in my opinion, by far the best offensive player. And he's not without flaw, clearly. He hasn't set the world alight, but 3 home runs, 2 salamis, 5 stolen bags, a ton of walks. He has shown progression on the walks front. Center field is still fine, still good. It's still Jazz. Like, he's a difference maker. I look at it and think about Jazz. At the moment, everyone's looking to him to basically carry this team on his back. I look at Jazz and think, imagine if, like the Bravos, you plumbed him in, like a Michael Harris, and you plumbed him in and he's hitting 7-8 in a lineup like that. Just how much Jazz could thrive in that situation. Like, that's the thing for me. And so I think Jazz has huge value. And I think if he gets into a lineup that's deep, even something like the Dodgers lineup or something. I mean, like, imagine Jazz landing at the Dodgers, mate, with Miggy Rowe. I mean, that would be hysterical in some ways. But I look at like those types of rosters and think what impact Jazz could make. And it isn't just center field, right? We've seen him play second base well. So we don't have to limit and say who needs a center fielder. Like, Jazz can play anywhere defensively. But yeah, for me, I look at him and think right now he's the best Marlins offensive player, like by some margin, in my opinion. I know Arias, hits as a higher average, but it's an empty average. He can't field and he can't steal. He's expensive and he's got less control. So from a trade perspective, a value perspective, I think Jazz clears Arias easily. I think Jazz is easily the highest valued offensive guy, to be honest with you. I guess, what do the Marlins do now at this point, Shaun? Like, really, at this point, when you've started 6-23, like, what can you realistically do? And again, considering the farm system isn't like full of studs, and clearly at this point, like they've showed us a Max Meyer, they don't want to push anyone forward because they want to retain control as long as they can. This is a dead year. So they don't want to push anyone and start their service time clock or consume service time when they don't need to. So what do they do at this point, Shaun? Do they do anything, or they just stand pat and let it roll?
Yeah, pretty certain that's all we are going to see. I mean, there's some hope that there's going to be a bit of bounce back. Obviously, Bell started slowly. Fortes and Bethancourt have started slowly. That's less of a guarantee for a bounce back because this is what they are. They haven't got a bounce back to go to. This is pretty much what they are.
I mean, they're flatlined, mate. These guys are flatlined at this point, and they are what they are. And
the catching situation wasn't dealt with in the off season in any sizable way, and we are seeing it's bearing the fruits that you probably would expect.
Yeah,
you look through the lineup and it's really just not very infused. You've got guys like Nick Gordon and Bruhan who you hoped would bounce back, have a spark, would show something.
Yeah.
But whenever you're hoping from people that have never done it to now maybe do it, it's fool's gold, isn't it? And I think
fool's gold.
I think the Marlins cheaping out over the offseason really is now starting to show. The only people I can really see anything of bounce back is Bell, and that's huge for the Marlins for one reason only. They're going to trade him at the deadline. So
I know they're going to hope to anyway. Like they hope to and move the money too.
Yeah, continues to hit below the Mendoza line, then they're going to continue to have to pay him because no one's going to want that. When the Marlins got Bell, we all said it was a great deal. Especially when he started hitting bombs last year and playing really well. But part of the parcel was the fact that they were going to have to pay him all that money this year, the money that they probably would have preferred to give to Soler or to someone else.
Agreed.
So for him to have a down season now at the end when they're trying to look to trade him, it is a concern.
I'm glad you called that out on the off season. I remember us speaking about it, or at least listen, it was a long off season and there was a lot of podcasts recorded, but on Bell specifically, he had, like Soler, he had the ability to opt in or opt out, whatever it might be. Soler, it was clear he was going to. And to your point, they were connected. If Bell opted out, then the Marlins then freed up the money maybe to go back and get a more guaranteed impact stick in Hoy Soler. As soon as Bell opted in, and I know there's PR spin around it saying, Bruce Sherman called him and said, we want you to stay, and he was influencing him, et cetera, but I think in the heart of hearts there for the Marlins, that they were maybe hoping that Bell didn't opt in to that money because 16.5 was too rich, and we saw it this offseason. Like, you could get a Josh Bell production for 1.5 mil, to be honest. Like, that was available the way the offseason played out. So the Marlins have ended up a little bit scorned, but I frankly don't care because Bell and Berger collectively gave them the boost that gave us that postseason run. So for me, I'm happy with that. No doubt about it. I want to ask you about the bullpen as well, because that has been, it's been a position of, not strength. Let's call it that way. It has been an Achilles heel for the Marlins this year, completely opposite to last year. So I wanted to ask you about that. Before we do that, time to let you know about our good friends over at FanDuel, and it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball, of course, is in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, guys, back here with me, Peter Pratt, and the UK GOAT, Shaun Barrett. The Marlins, 6-23. The worst team in baseball. Seemingly not much that they can change. Maybe not much they will change. Shaun, when I look at what has changed, for me, I know there's injuries in the rotation, but I feel like they're navigating that as best they can. However, for me, the bullpen is the clear difference maker here. It was a difference maker in a positive way in 23. It was nails. It was the leverage pen was immense. They barely let a lead go. In 24, from day one, it started badly, and it hasn't improved. I don't know what's changed specifically with the bullpen and some of the guys in it, but man, oh man, the volatility of bullpens and relievers is showing up big time for the fish here. They've obviously got the situation where they've got like a revolving like DFA guy to help with like games that are blown out and bullpen games and whatever. But when you look at this bullpen, Shaun, like what's happened here? How has it gone from nails to whatever this is in 24?
Yeah, I mean, the volatility, as you put it, of a bullpen can change one year from the next. I mean, if you think back as recent as Bass and his dreadful season, then bouncing back to the point where we were actually able to trade him for something.
Yeah.
You can never trust a bullpen, and I think that's certainly a justification for not paying for guys, whether that is in draft capital, trade capital, or whether that's just free agency money. But the Marlins they didn't just do a poor job, they just didn't do a job on the bullpen at all. Again, over the offseason, when we were in it, we were trying to convince ourselves everything was going to be fine. But ultimately, if you look back with hindsight at this offseason, the Marlins really did just paint the colours on the wall and say, this is what we're going to do this year. And the problem with the approach is the guys they brought in weren't great, but also they're now being overused. If you look at the Rays, if this is going to be the model for the Marlins going forward, as far as a bullpen piece, they are very good, the Rays, at getting guys who have very good velocity. That's one of the main key pieces. They tend to always be on minor league deals. They don't pay for anybody, and they straight up abuse those arms. We're going to have you here for 3 years on the minimum, and by the end of those 3 years, your arm's going to fall off, and we don't care. It's an incredibly vicious way of dealing with pitching. But it's financially very, very positive for the team. And to a certain degree, the Marlins are doing a bit of that this year. They've got these disposable arms that they've brought in from nowhere, either cheaply on trades or whether it's a free agent. Like Emmanuel Ramirez is a free agent guy from independent ball.
Yeah.
How careful do you think they're going to be with his arm?
Yeah. He looked all right, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. They have no interest. So these guys at the moment, I worry for them for the amount of innings, appearances that they're going to have over this year, because in a lost season, the Marlins really just aren't going to care, because none of these guys, I look at the bullpen right now, and I don't see a single person who could potentially be here. Well, I say next year. Next year, again, isn't going to be a season that they care about. So maybe they will all still be there, but there's not a guy there that you look at and go, looking forward to seeing him bounce back, because in Scott's case, he's going to be traded. Everyone else, the Marlins have pieced together a very cheap and poor bullpen, and
cheap and poor. Cheap and poor sums it up, mate. What did you make of, because we haven't spoken about this directly, and equally, you may not have even seen it because you might have, been snoozing at this point, but what did you make of Sixto Sanchez getting the start the other night against the Bravos? And equally, the feedback after that, we may see more of that. It might be that Sixto as a starter becomes a thing again in 24. How surprising would that be for you?
Yeah, I remember seeing the news and thinking, oh, I actually really probably should watch that game out of morbid curiosity, maybe more so than anything else. Ultimately, that didn't actually end up happening. I didn't watch it. But at this point, why not?
Keep it rolling.
I'm happy for them to try anything. I mean, get Ryan on the mound. I don't really care at this point. The team aren't going anywhere. And if Sixto can, obviously the results didn't exactly go very well, but it is a case of, why not? Give him a shot. He has beaten everyone else as far as he's already achieved what no one thought he would achieve, which is get back on the mound and pitch. The results have been varying, but ultimately put him on the mound, give him a start. Why not? That might actually get me to watch more games just to see him and his rotundness.
It was entertaining, no doubt. The biggest entertainment moment, the biggest flashpoint anyway, that I think had national recognition, if I recall correctly, was him going for a pickoff move at second base when there was no one at second base. So that was deemed a balk. I still struggle with that rule, but even I could understand how that one was defined a balk and actually balked in a run. So that was a Sixto special there. But the funny thing was, and I spoke about this pre-game with the Locked On Braves host, actually, because we were talking about this Sixto decision. I said, the thing is with Sixto, like, on the road in Atlanta, starting your first game for years, like, he'll be feeling that mentally. Like, there'll be a lot of nerves. And I think we saw that early on. And I think once, when we reflect on the AJ Puck situation, particularly his first game, I think that was probably a similar situation where he just mentally, he just went. And, talking about not gripping the baseball, it was just a story. Like, I think he bottled it fundamentally. But going back to Sixto, I think with Sixto there were some nerves. But as he went on through the game into the third inning, he got stronger. He got stronger and maybe settled down and started to get himself going. And for the Marlins, maybe that's the approach with Sixto. Just, keep going. 65 pitches, 70, whatever it might be. If you can get 4 innings out of him, happy days. I think that's probably a win for Sixto because out of the pen, it definitely hasn't translated. The spring stuff hasn't carried over, and he's looked like a bit of a weak link in the pen. When your ERA is like 10 or somewhere in that range, then clearly, you have a decision to make. But he stayed on the roster for now. We'll see if he makes it. Shaun, I want to ask you about, speaking about that, I'm going to throw some names at you after the second ad, and I want you to give me a sense of how long they'll be on the roster, or do they make it to the end of this season with the Marlins? Are they DFA'd? Are they traded? Whatever it might be. There's quite a few names to think about, but I'm going to call out a few of the big-time names, let's say. Before we do that, time to let you know about our friends over at DoorDash. Yes, sir. We've got the graphics pumped. Guys, it's coming up to Mother's Day, and you know what that means, right? It's time to spoil your mother, of course. And you want to make mum smile, then start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with gifts from the brands she loves, delivered the very same day with DoorDash. Mums are a gift, so give her the best this Mother's Day. Give gifts as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. Select from hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets to the best of tech, to self-care essentials and more delivered right to her door. And if she has a sweet tooth, you're in luck. Is she a tech enthusiast? Probably not. I don't know. My mum definitely isn't. A beauty connoisseur? Absolutely. Or is she outdoorsy? Or even a fan of tennis, maybe. I don't know. No matter what she's into, you can make her smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, makeup, tech gear, workout wear, and more. So get a Mother's Day gift as unique as she is with DoorDash. Use code LOCKEDONMLB to get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now on DoorDash. That's Locked On MLB. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. All right, guys, back here with me, Peter Pratt, and UK GOAT, Shaun Barrett. Yes, the Marlins are still the worst team in baseball. Nothing has changed during this episode, and it's now time to consider the guys that are on the roster and what the outlook will be for them. I have a few names to share with you, Shaun. I want you to give me a sense of how it plays out for them in 2024. I want to start with the big-time off-season acquisition. Tim Anderson, baby. Tim Anderson, the stick, the former batting champ. Doesn't look like the stick's going to recover. It looks similar to what we saw last year. The defense has been okay, I would say. Tim Anderson, a one-year deal. Shaun, how does this end for Tim Anderson?
If I can just quickly go back to that ad read, you had me a bit concerned there. I don't know if your viewers in America know this, but Mother's Day in America is completely different to Mother's Day in the UK as far as dates go. We've already had ours. So I was a bit concerned. I'm like, have I? No, I've definitely done Mother's Day this year.
You're covered, Shaun. Don't worry. You are covered. This is one of the confusing things where Mother's Days are different dates, UK to US. So, no, this was very specific to our US listeners, of which is 95% of this episode. Us, as good UK sons, we've already been there and done it. So happy days. Tim Anderson, does he remain? Does he want to be a Mother's Day gift for someone? That's the question. Does he see out the full year with the Marlins? Do they move him, trade, or do they even DFA him along the way?
No, I mean, you hope he's not still here because that means he's bounced back enough that they can trade him. But yeah, so far this year, you're seeing nothing different than we've seen for the last 2 years from him as far as performance with the stick. As you said, defensively, he's okay. Just above replacement level in a defense, but it's a hit. No home runs yet this year, a couple of bags. That's pretty much pro rata what he's done the last couple of years. So for the Marlins to be able to trade him, we're going to have to see a bounce back that we were not even hoping for, but praying for. Like, we knew what we were doing when they acquired him, as far as we are hoping against almost hope that maybe a change of scenery would do the job. We heard about all the toxic sort of situations that he had in Chicago, and obviously Chicago they've been a fire, tire fire the last couple of years.
They have been. He follows them around seemingly.
Yeah, evidently.
Might be nothing.
Out of the pan into the fire.
Yeah, for sure. Talk to me about, the catching situation we've called out. Craig Mish was asking Peter Bendix directly about the catching situation. He kind of acknowledged that it's underperforming at this stage. Talk to me about Christian Bethancourt then as well, because, he just about broke his duck in terms of offense. The defense, to me, looks to be not as advertised. I'm looking at Christian Bethancourt, and I'm seeing a guy there that probably has got a month max left in him before the Marlins go in a different direction and just simply move on. What about you on Christian Bethancourt?
No, if we can almost certainly rule out the trade at this point.
That's ruled out.
So if the Marlins do get rid of him, release him, DFA him, whatever they do with him, then the next question is, well, who do they bring in? It would presumably have to be somebody already inside the organization. Obviously, Will Banfield is probably the more interesting guy because he is a prospect and he's been inside the organization. But quite frankly, he's done nothing in the minor leagues to suggest. So I don't think in any way that a person that they bring up an older minor league guy that isn't going to actually have a high ceiling or a major league ceiling, then the actual performance isn't going to improve in any large scale that is noticeable. It's not like you're bringing up a catcher that isn't also going to hit 8th or 9th in the lineup and be the backup to Fortes, who also isn't exactly performing particularly well. It's not. He's been dreadful too, to be frank. But because he's young-ish for a catcher, because he has that control, because the Marlins aren't interested in winning at the moment, he will be given every opportunity to become a major league catcher, and through the rebuild, that will be the case. I think they'll keep hold of him through all of his minor league, major league minimum years, and it may be even early years of arbitration, because with his performance, how much money is that actually going to be?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not going to be breaking the bank. And for, a guy that's young and improving, well, I say improving, but, is solid defensively, I'd say Nick Fortes. So, there is value there. For me with Bethancourt, like, it feels like it's just one of those moves that's gone bad already. It's kind of snowballing in some ways. Like, clearly mentally, he's kind of struggling. It's affecting his performance. When he was on the IL, they brought the dude up from, AAA. He's young, hungry. He's on the upward curve. Like, for me, I'd just probably cut bait with Bethancourt now at this point. Like, to be honest with you, I was stunned they didn't make the Joey Bart move at the time, like where he was out there, cash consideration, some small move, whatever it is, to go and get Joey Bart. Like, it felt like a no-brainer to me. It's a red flag that Peter Bendix didn't make that happen, considering the upside play that was there and the deficiencies they have in this spot already. So that was a surprise. Nevertheless, let's segue away from that one. Josh Bell, Sean, we've already spoke about him briefly. He is on a sizable contract, the biggest contract of any of the offensive guys in the Marlins this year. Performance has been underwhelming. It's fair to say. Don't have a ton. He's not being pressurized at first base, but clearly there is this Troy Johnston thing brewing at AAA. Dane Myers has forced his way back into the situation recently. The question, I think, at this point is, do the Marlins look to cut bait with Josh Bell? Like, is he tradable? And if he maybe isn't tradable, do they maybe just go the DFA route and move on from Bell and, I guess, prioritize Troy Johnston getting some big league at-bats? I don't know. So what's your sense on Josh Bell? Probably the most likely is they trade him for a very minor piece, I guess, along the way. That's probably as good as it's going to get, right?
Yeah, I mean, a trade with Josh Bell is going to be closer to the deadline as opposed to immediately now. The Marlins aren't going to cut bait and DFA him. We've seen with Garcia, the Marlins have absolutely no interest in paying a guy not to be on the field, even if he's a net negative. So Bell will remain with the team. He will remain on the field. He'll remain in the starting lineup.
Yep.
Up until a point where, and hopefully, he acquires enough value that they can trade him. But if not, then yeah, it will be a case of he's here for the full season. He gets a full season of at-bats. And yeah, the only thing you could say is, the Marlins have got a couple of semi-interesting, like maybe major league bats in AAA that they want to give a go. But are they going to pay, $16.5 million for the pleasure to see that and get rid of Bell? I'd be very surprised. I'd like to see it, because if Bell isn't going to perform, then obviously you want to see what you've got in those guys going forwards.
Yeah, agreed.
But the Marlins, 99.9% chance are going to keep him until they can trade him at the deadline.
Yeah, sounds most likely. I just wonder if their patience runs out and they move on. But I think you bang on there, Sean. One final guy on the offensive side, then we'll get out of here. And actually, I do want to ask you briefly about Peter Bendix and an opinion poll from your perspective at this point. But I want to ask you about Vidal Bruhan as well, because Vidal Bruhan has had a very interesting first month or so with the Marlins in many ways. There's been errors, there's been missteps, there's been misplays, there's been empty sticks, but the stick starts to come alive a touch. I can't quite work out what Vidal Bruhan is, what value he offers, where he plays, what he can do. I'm a little bit confused about the player, to be honest with you. And I know Peter Bendix is saying it's too early to have a full evaluation, but for him specifically, he's been in the same organization as him for many years. It looks to me like Vidal Bruhan isn't a Major League Baseball player, in my opinion, at this point. The question is, how does it end with the Marlins, or does it in 24?
Again, it's hard to say. He's certainly not going to get traded. There's no value there at all.
No.
He's young enough that you could, unlike Bell, where you could justify just letting him sit in the lineup and hope something happens, hope something clicks. But he's 26 years old, and I think his whole career at the high levels of minor leagues and throughout his whole major league career, it's been a case of an organization and a fan base hoping that something clicks. At a certain point, you've just got to accept that it isn't going to click and move on. But for the money that he's owed, for the lack of options that the Marlins have at the higher levels of minors, I see no reason, or I don't see an option where the Marlins don't just give him the full year and hope for the best.
Seems to be the way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hope when you know there is no hope.
I guess so. Final one for you then, Shaun. We'll get out of here because we're a few minutes over, but, it's worth it. Where's your opinion poll sitting with Peter Bendix at this point? A month or so in, he's responsible for this roster, the big league roster specifically. There is no GM. He's assumed that role. And so he is responsible for the big league roster. Clearly, it's not his priority at this point. Not that he's specified that to the fan base, but, that's clearly the direction of travel. Where's your head at in terms of Peter Bendix, what he's trying to do? It's early, clearly, in his time, but the big league roster that he's responsible for is 6-23, coming off a playoff berth. It's embarrassing at the moment. The product on the field is embarrassing, and he's responsible for that. So how do you rate, in an opinion perspective, where he sits on the scale? 100 being like max opinion poll, 1 being the worst possible. So where does he sit on that scale for you at this point?
It's going to be a 5, and I'm always.
Do you mean a 50? Do you mean bang down the middle?
Yeah.
Yeah, just checking. Not 5 out of 100.
Oh no, 5. Yeah, 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10.
I'm reluctant to attack a GM because a GM is beholden to the owner.
Yeah.
And he has to say what he's saying. You're never going to get anything interesting out of a GM because that's not their role. If Peter Bendix had his way, he would have come in and said, the major league roster isn't good enough to compete. I don't have the money available to me to improve it, to make it competitive. And we don't have anything in the minor leagues to improve it either. Therefore, we're going to have to rebuild and blow it up. Because that's what they're going to do. That's what they were always going to do when he was brought in.
Yeah,
we know that because of look what happened with Skip. Skip knew that there was a rebuild coming and he wanted no piece of that. So that's why his option was taken away. He asked for his option to be taken away. You can't say that. Peter Bendix can't say any of that because all of a sudden, those limited season ticket calls that do get picked up aren't getting picked up anymore. And there are ticket plans that need to be sold. And yes, we can laugh about the Marlins and its attendance, but they still do draw a little bit. That money still goes into Bruce Sherman's pocket.
No doubt.
It certainly doesn't go onto the field.
No doubt.
So he's between a rock and a hard place. He knew what he was buying into, presumably. Yeah. He wasn't given any promises of this, that, or the other. If he was, then he's a fool for believing it. So
I think you knew. I think you knew what he was walking into.
You can't adequately judge Bendix on his job, unfortunately, for 3 to 5 years. This is now a 3 to 5 year plan, program, and it's gonna suck. We've had a long time, isn't it? We've had that taste of the 2 playoff runs, and to be fair, we've had rebuild winning windows with significantly less than 2 playoff appearances and a playoff series win. So looking back at it, yes, it's not been great. It's been worse before. And you've just got to hope. It's a shame because we've grown to love these guys, but that's the Sandy window. Unfortunately, as I kept saying for years, it's going to close. It will close one point. It is now officially closed.
It's closed, baby. It's closed. With that, mate, this show is officially closed. Not forever, but just for today. Appreciate everyone making Locked On Marlins your first listen, guys. And the UK goat, Shaun Barrett, just keeping it real. To be honest with you, I think that final monologue nailed it. Absolutely nailed the situation for Peter Bendix. And I do think it's hard to point specifically and only to Peter Bendix. We have to look at Bruce Sherman and the way that he's running this organization. Peter Bendix is restricted in what he can say and what he can share, but I think, Shaun, you absolutely nailed it there in terms of if he was being real, then that's what he would have said. I think he pretty much would have said exactly those things, but was not able to or afraid to say them as he walked into a new role with a fan base that was expecting to carry on the momentum from a wonderful 2023. Appreciate everyone making Locked On Marlins your first listen, guys, and joining me, Peter Pratt, and the UK GOAT, Shaun Barrett. We'll be back tomorrow, of course, as we recap what is hopefully not, or maybe for some, hopefully is, a sweep against the Nats. Look forward to seeing you then, guys.